Good morning to you. I've actually shot this video after the day that you're about to watch. The reason being, we went to the prison here and we went to the killing fields here, and much of what you're going to see in this video today could be very or deeply disturbing for you. So I just want to put that caveat out there for you. If you don't want to watch this video, then that's absolutely fine. Check in tomorrow with the videos that come after that. However, if you do want to have a bit of an insight into what this country went through in very recent times, in my lifetime, then please watch today's video. And yeah, there's two ways you can watch this. You'll go to the killing fields and you'll see that I do hone in on the information boards. I only hold the frame for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. If you don't want to particularly get too into what happened here, then just watch the video unfold and don't necessarily do it. If you do want to get more information, then pause on those boards. You can read some of the information there, and it will give you an idea of some of the atrocities that occurred here. Equally, at the end of this video, I've put a long piece to camera, it's about 8 minutes or so, describing really what happened and kind of filling in the blanks. So if you do want to have an insight into what happened in this country, it could be deeply disturbing for you, but do watch the whole video in its entirety. If you don't particularly want to watch that kind of material, please skip this one and I'll check in with you tomorrow. Okay, enjoy the video. Good morning to you. It's going to be blowy. I apologise if the sound is popping because of that. But we are heading now to the killing fields. It's about 20 odd kilometres in a tuk-tuk. So it's an experience, isn't it?
It is.
I've done about 5 minutes in it and I feel a bit beaten up already. So we've got a whole day in this thing. From the killing fields, we're going to the prison. As I said yesterday, we're preparing ourselves mentally. It's going to be harrowing. But what we were greeted with first thing this morning, the back of our tuk-tuk driver's head was his cap, which I tried to show you. I don't know if you came across, which was, what's it say? Unlimited possibilities. Infinite possibilities. And I thought, well, there you go. It's got to be a sign that our tuk-tuk driver's wearing an infinite possibilities cap. He obviously stands for very similar values to our good selves. Right, I'll share this as it unfolds. Have an awesome day. Okay, so I'll take some time out later to reflect fully with you on this. But as you can see, absolutely harrowing, the stuff that went on there.
It's incredibly sobering. You're just kind of just trying to take it all in.
And like with Vietnam, you sort of find yourself kind of having to process a little bit. But I'll come back to you and I'll share a little bit later. Right now we're heading off to the prison, which apparently makes this look a little bit like Disneyland. So yeah. Okay, so once again, harrowing stuff. I will report back to you later. It would not be appropriate to stand here and go through it with you. However, we're going to now just pop into the
Palace.
Palace. Is that it? Just palace?
The palace. Yeah.
The palace. We're going to pop into the palace here and then we're going to head on back. But I will give you a full debrief later. Okay, so back at our hotel, I want to give myself some time to really process some of what we saw today. Also, we're going from one thing to the next. I didn't really have enough time to really compose my thoughts to be able to pass them on to you. Really harrowing stuff today, right? And we saw some really bad stuff in Vietnam and stuff that went in the Vietnam War, and some of the stuff you don't get to hear about in the West and stuff, and certainly you never see it portrayed in a film over there. So you know, we were kind of not numb, that's not true, but we were kind of a little bit desensitized coming into this here, even though we knew some of the history about the place. But what really hit me wasn't, yes, it was barbaric and it was brutal and everything else. It was the scale of the thing, I think, is what really shook us today. So yeah, we kind of did it in reverse order a little bit, but let's have a look at this, right? So basically the prison you saw. So people who were suspected of being an enemy of Pol Pot, who was the guy who led the regime here, were basically taken to the prison. They were held in the mass prison cells, and then what they would do is they would then bring them down into the individual prison cells, which was easier then to take them over when it was their time for torturing. So that's what happened. You came in, you went into the mass cells, you go down into the individual cells. From the individual cells, you'd be tortured up to 3 times a day for weeks, if not months, until basically you confessed, right? So people were confessing to absolutely anything and everything to basically stop the torture. Once they confessed, they were processed, right? Processing basically meant they were taken over to the killing fields, back of a wagon, straight over to the pits. They knelt by the pits and they were killed. But obviously, people were admitting to absolutely anything. So many of these people were innocents. In fact, arguably all of them were innocents because he was the barbaric arsehole that was doing this in the first place. So even the people that were against him were innocent, if you want to call it that. But here's some of the criteria. He got increasingly paranoid. Here's some of the criteria that meant that you were an enemy of his, right? Anyone that was educated, so teachers were enemies. Anyone who was spiritual, so the monks over here, the religious people over here, bang, all killed. The French, not the French, but anyone who spoke French, killed. Anyone who spoke French was killed. If you had soft palms, right, soft hands, or wore glasses, you were killed, right? You were considered an enemy of his, right? So you'd have been taken to the prison potentially, maybe killed straight away, but taken to the prison, processed, tortured for weeks, maybe months, until you admitted that you were in collusions with the CIA or the KGB or anything else. Once you confessed to that, you'd be basically guilty. Once you were found guilty of something, they would kill your entire family. Why? Because he didn't want any vendettas, right? So he was so thorough. So if I was initially found guilty, right, or first of all, right, if I was suspected because I wore glasses or had soft hands or spoke French or something like that, or was educated or religious person, I'd be taken, I'd be processed, beaten, tortured until I confessed to being in cohorts with the CIA or whatever. I'd then be processed, killed. All my family would then be killed, every single one of them. And I think, you know, when you go to the killing fields, it's the scale that surprises you in 2 things. Number one, it's so much smaller than you think it's going to be. Like, it's called the killing fields. You assume it's going to be like a big field, etc. It's not. It's a very small, compact area where this happened. Number 2, the numbers of people that were killed there you can't comprehend it. And of course, this was just one of, I think they said 300 places in the country where this was happening, right? Obviously, this being one of the most significant. So, you know, we're talking about hundreds of bodies being found in graves that are literally no bigger than this hotel room. They were 10 to 15 feet deep, and they were just piled in on top of each other. When they filled the grave up, they would cover it up. They don't then take to the next grave. What would then happen, of course, is the rains would come, etc. Some of these graves would burst and they would open, and some of these bodies were, you know, and it's just fucking hideous from start to finish. So, you know, initially, let's go back a little bit right to the beginning. So initially, if you're working for the government or you're in the city and stuff like that, right, they would flush you out, right? So they flushed you out, back out into the fields. Everyone was working. He had this crazy idea that everyone could produce a certain amount of rice. They couldn't partly because they weren't skilled and in the land and everything else. So then they started to starve, right? So you'd work, you know, 10, 12, 15, so send up to 18 or 19-hour days in the fields. You were eating literally like this kind of like this rice porridge mix twice a day. So you're starving to death, working your ass off. Then if you stole an apple or something, you were killed. If you went and got processed at the place, if they thought you were an enemy, they took you off to this place and then they tortured you for 3-4 weeks, months maybe. Then they would take you from there, and then eventually you'd end up in the killing fields. When you went to the killing fields, what they'd do is they'd walk you to the edge of the pit blindfolded. They had music playing to try and muffle some of the sounds of the noises of people there being killed. They'd kneel you by the side of one of these pits, and they wouldn't use bullets because apparently bullets were too expensive. What they would do is just bludgeon you to death with whatever they had. So, whether we're talking about a machete or a bar or something like that, or a hoe, whatever it was, right? They would basically bludgeon you to death on the side of the pit, kick you into the pit on top of all these other bodies that were obviously already there and decaying and everything else. Then, because some of those bodies weren't dead, some of those people weren't actually dead when they fell in the pit, right? On top of all these other bodies and everything else, they then sprayed this agent over the top, which basically killed everybody off that wasn't dead already. Fucking horrific. One of the most horrific things we did come across yesterday was the tree which I showed you that had all the little wristbands that had been left as like little offerings, to that tree. That tree was where they basically killed the babies, and what they would do is they would take the babies off the mum when she went to the prison. They would take the kids straight away off and kill them instantly, right? That was it. They'd take the children and just kill the children. And the babies, and they couldn't work this out. This is horrific, by the way. They found hair and bone, and they found brain matter on this tree, and they couldn't work it out, and they finally worked out what happened. What they were doing is basically they were babies, and they were just swinging the babies against the tree and killing them and throwing them in the pits. You saw the clothes there as well. Those clothes, some of them, there's a baby pair of shorts there. I didn't zoom in. I think it's just you didn't need all that, right? But there's a little pair of shorts, probably for a kid 3 years old, something like that. And the clothes and the material are still coming up through the grave. So I took a few pictures there. You saw of some material on the ground and in the ground, and that's their clothes that are still coming up. So bones and clothes are still coming up. When it rains, they're coming up to the surface and everything else. So fucking hideous. You have all these mixed emotions, from just the anger of it all to whatever. Here's the thing that got me and Trace, again, I'd say more than anything else. The fucker lived to like 70, right? This is after he'd done all this and everything else. The Vietnamese came in, the Vietnamese overturned him, right? Thank God for them, and freed them to some degree, his country, right? They did free the country from him. He pisses off, right? He gets a seat on the United fucking Nations because they still consider him to be the rightful ruler of Cambodia, and lives to like 70 odd and whatever, absolutely uncharged and everything else. The mind beggars belief. It really does. But anyway, there you go. So I've done a lot of talking here to really, I suppose, make sense of what I've shown you, if that makes sense, right? To make sense of what I've shown you. But obviously, this is, if you're my age, right? If you're in your 40s, late 40s, this was when we were kids, and I remember this on Blue Peter, right? So I remember hearing some stuff on Blue Peter about the Cambodian appeals and stuff like that happened after the war and everything else. So, if you're 50 right now, for example, this thing finished in 1979, right? So, we were old enough. Anyway, it begs belief, right? So when we were sitting there watching Blue Peter about Cambodia appeals, these poor kids over here had gone through absolute fucking hell. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'll just talk forever. But I do think this stuff needs to get out. It's interesting, isn't it? They talk about it at the prison, which is to pass on the message. They say you must pass on this message. It must never happen again. Anyway, so there you go. I guess I'm passing the message on as they told me to. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we are heading on to Dubai, but not until late at night. We're flying overnight tomorrow night, and then we've got a couple of days there, and then we are coming home. Hope you had an awesome day. I'll check in with you then. Good night.